Did it again. I just am so joy-filled that you get to meet my friends. Right? You ever have that kind of, when you're hanging out with folks and you say, oh, you have to meet my friend. You have to meet the amazing people in my life. And it's like what we did is we brought all our favorite people in life together in a space. And how beautiful is that? Right? I'm really grateful, excited, and nervous to do this. And I'm sure about 8 other feelings. And I am because, you know, in my life, I would say the beginnings of my life, I grew up in a faith that was pretty conservative. And I say that because I was incredibly judgmental. And as I walked through that sort of space of being pretty judgmental, as the universe would have it, it handed me a 2x4. And the 2x4 was that I ended up coming out as being gay. Now you might say, well, what does that mean? And it wasn't that the universe was punishing me. I don't believe that's what it is. But the 2x4 was really how I saw life and how I saw people. And one of the things that happened is I judged a lot of my siblings pretty harshly without realizing it. And I imagine when I came out, there was this kind of, yay, she fell off her pedestal. Right? And I really wanted them to see the pain I was going through. And honestly, I don't know that they could because I had judged. And so it was kind of a healing had to happen before that space and place of grace could find its way. The truth is we don't know what we don't know. And when we come together in spiritual community, as much as I love to just deliver these inspiring, pretty fun messages, there are times we have to deliver messages that are kind of weaved within them, weaved a message of, let's pay attention. Let's step into another place of awareness because what I have known may not be accurate or true. And we do the best we can with what we know, don't we? So over the past few weeks, I have been emotional and tearful, and AIF has certainly contributed to it. But some of my own events where I've walked through with friends and family have been held up by some lessons that showed up for me. There were 3 things that I've kind of walked through as in coming to understand. That 1, diversity isn't diversity without inclusion, and they are very different. Diversity is the manifest form, and inclusion is the action I take. 2 very different things. And I can speak of diversity, but unless I act inclusively and become conscious of the way that I think and behave, I can actually hurt another. Now, I know I've hurt people. We all have. But the opportunity exists for me to know this. It's important to get as clear as we can about what we're talking about, which isn't a single shot. It's a over and over and over. And I may have some slightly unfortunate news for you, until I die. Getting clear requires mindfulness and presence and empathy, and the practice that is the most difficult to do, forgiveness. Forgiveness of myself, forgiveness of others, asking for forgiveness of what I have done, which is really hard. Because sometimes we don't think or know that we've done something. So when someone comes and says, you did this, and you go, well, wait a minute, no, I didn't. I've right away stopped and ignored a story that someone's come to me that is really important for me to hear, whether I did it or not. anecdotal information about diversity is dangerous. Well, I just feel that way. Or my one news source that teaches me that. These are things that are dangerous only because when we choose to learn about diversity from what I would say is very limited sources, we can cause harm. We can. And it's why the invitation, we are really not practicing oneness unless we can step deeper into understanding the things that I am unconscious to. Even when I do step on someone, even when I've been stepped on, empathy and forgiveness are part of the journey on both sides. Sometimes I can't get it on both sides, but I don't necessarily need the other person to be aware for me to forgive. So let's just look around in the room for just a moment and see what we would call diversity. There's some diversity in the room for sure. But I want you to think about this. You're going to hear some terms in AIF that if you've never heard them before, you're probably going to be disturbed and frustrated. Good for you. That's what we do in spiritual community. We disturb. We say we comfort those that are uncomfortable, and we create an uncomfortable situation for those that are way too comfortable. And believe me, that happens like every day of my life as I'm studying this philosophy. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Or what have I been doing? Or how am I contributing to this? But I want you to take a test. Now, for those of you that love tests, I just want a show of hands if you love tests. I knew there was a few of you in the room. I swear I did not like you in school. Now, for those of you that don't like tests, which I have this sort of love-hate relationship with tests. You know, I was a very conscious student, and I wanted to do well, so when I didn't do well, I hated tests. And when I did do well, I was running down the hallway screaming and celebrating. For those of you that are those perfectionists, I want you to take that perfectionist side of you and just kind of put it right here. Can you do that? And if you think that this is a matter of doing well in this test or not doing well, it's not that kind of test. So I'm going to give you a little test on white privilege. Are you ready? Well, it's not just white privilege, it's privilege, which is a really triggering word for some folks. So I want you to just take the trigger and just for a moment, just go, okay, I'm triggered. Can you do that? Can you just say, okay, I'm triggered, and I'm just going to put it right here. Now, check off in your mind all the statements that apply to you. Okay, first of all, I'm white. Check, that's for me, okay? I have never been discriminated against because of my skin color. Well, there's another check, right? I have never been the only person of my race in a room. That's probably a big old check, right? I have never been mocked for my accent. I have never been told I'm attractive for my race. Funny, happens. I have never been a victim of violence because of my race. I have never been a victim of violence because of my sexual orientation. I have never been called a racial slur. I have never been told I sound white. And I'm just going to pause on that. 100% of the time when I'm on the phone, I get sir. You do too, Des? You and me we're just going out afterwards and having a cocktail for sure. The interesting thing about that is when salespeople come on phone calls, they automatically make assumptions. And I get tired oftentimes of saying, I'm not a sir. Thank you, sir. I'm not a sir. Thank you, sir. What I'm saying is when we're that unconscious, first of all, you lost my cell. But secondly, you've probably lost my business to your company. Why? Because there's not a consciousness in that call that says that I matter. How many folks feel that way sometimes, right? As a stranger, you've never been asked to touch your hair or asked if it was real. Yes, that happens. I am heterosexual. I have never lied about my sexuality. I've never had to come out. I've never doubted my parents' acceptance of my sexuality. I have never been called a fag. I have never been called a dyke. I have never been called a fairy or any other derogatory term. I have never tried to hide my sexuality. I am always comfortable with public displays of affection with my partner in public. I've never pretended to be just friends with my significant other. I have never been ostracized by my religion for my sexual orientation. I have never been told I would burn in hell for my sexual orientation. I have never been told that my sexuality is just a phase. Just wait till you're older, then you'll know. I've never been violently threatened for my race, my sexual orientation, or any part of me. I feel comfortable in the gender I was born as. I still identify as the gender I was born in. I have never tried to change my gender. I have never been denied an opportunity because of my gender. I make more money than my professional counterparts of a different gender. I have never felt unsafe because of my gender. I have never been catcalled. I have never been sexually harassed or assaulted. You see what privilege might be. It's slightly different. In some cases, privilege, every one of us experience privilege in some way. And a lot of us are privileged without knowing it because we think, let's just say, for example, I grew up in a traumatized home. So I don't have privilege. We're not talking about trauma. We're just talking about diversity, and it's different. We're talking about a part of you that is visible or becomes visible because of something you say that people assume something about you because of that identifier of you, whether it be race, gender, sexual orientation, ability. The stories and beliefs that I live with around differences are the things that I get to look at. They're the things I get to consider. Because anyone in this room that thinks that they have nothing to learn about diversity, we're in the wrong community, right? And what happens in the world, when I think about True Colors and the song and the fact there are people in the world that do not show up as who they are for fear of being ostracized, assaulted, reduced, excluded. And I'm not talking about the person that walks in the room that we're afraid of violence or whatever that is. Oftentimes we even apply whether someone will be violent or not based upon a particular part of who they are. Because we do what Ernest Holmes calls, we assign what we call race consciousness, which is this overall generalization of a group. And anytime I generalize a group, I'm harming myself and that group, everyone. Sameness is not what we're focused on. It's diversity. We want to make sure we see that diversity. If we do not see the diversity, the differences in one another, then I will not be conscious to what your journey will be. You are not the same as me. You cannot understand my journey, nor can I understand yours. But I can be present for that journey. I can be an ally in that journey. If I am defensive, then I cannot be an ally. If I can be curious, if I can have that healthy, beautiful curiosity that this principle, that this philosophy invites us to have, then I can create a world that works for everyone. But as long as I think that I am not part of the problem or the challenge, then I cannot help. I cannot be. I cannot explore and invite the diversity that we talk about that we want. Ernest Holmes said, "For all you must do is to look about in nature, and you will find that while everything comes from one source, everything bears the stamp of a unique individuality. The great lesson that life is trying to teach us is that we are rooted in God, all of us. But each is an individualized center in the divine being, unity at the center, variety at the circumference. But unity does not mean uniformity. If we continue to just make each other safe so we keep coming back, we're missing the point. We're missing out on an opportunity to grow in a way that can only be provided, like Yellowstone, which everyone is at the table. Unity does not mean uniformity. Unity means a oneness of purpose. Unity means what is best and safe for the majority, hold on, without losing sight of each member of that majority and each location in it. This fly loves me. I'm so sweet. Faith without works is dead. Let me put that in diversity terms. Diversity without inclusion is dead. Diversity without inclusion. You cannot talk about diversity without acting. And that part of that acting is the consciousness that I bring, the awareness that I bring, not perfect. By the way, you perfectionists who just thought you just screwed up on that test. When we arrive, we're probably not here. It is the objective of life to learn more and more about the blind spots that I have, about the places in life that I am just adamant I'm right. I'm so right, and I don't like being wrong. Don't you? My perfectionist person, that part of me, does not like to be wrong, and it doesn't like to harm, and it doesn't like to do some of the things that I'm sure I'm probably doing. But what's really great about the philosophy we practice is it invites us to open up to I know what I know when I know it, which means I don't know a lot, by the way. But I come to know more and more and more about the things that I can look at. We should not only pray, as Ernest said, we should act, each contributing the best she or he or they has to the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary, not a sacrifice reluctantly made. Well, okay, I'll do it. Everybody else is doing it, I'll do it. No, not that one. But as one who offers all he, she, or they have for two great purposes. One, in a certain sense, we all desire self-preservation, but the other in the greater sense that there can be no individual self-preservation without the preservation of all. Save yourself, that's who you end up with. That alone scares me. What is diversity asking us to do? Tracy Brown, the author of the book, she says, diversity is not the problem. It is the stories we tell about diversity that is the problem. It's the story in my head of my participation and my effort and what I need to do and let go, and it's all of that. It's also stories that it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's uncomfortable. By the way, in your AIF groups, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm just going to claim that. It's going to be uncomfortable. It should be. Because you get to look at you and me. We get to look at each other, but in a place, if we want, of grace, which is I will listen and I will hear what is being spoken so that I can hear the journey of another. Seek to understand first. Seek to understand. I went to my 41st high school reunion this last weekend. Why 41? Well, that's a long story. Small town. We just do reunions every year until everybody goes to one. In attending it, I thought of my own experience growing up in this mining town. Anybody grow up in a mining town? My sister. I love that. Didn't see that coming. In the mining town where I grew up, in my home, there was considerable abuse and trauma. And it's really easy to think you're the only one going through it. It really is. And especially, I think children that have been traumatized have a reduced sense of empathy. By the way, empathy must be learned. You are not born with it. So it's what we get to learn. I found myself listening to others while I was there. I'm tearing up because I got to hear these stories of abuse that were happening in most of the homes that I was completely unaware of. And I had a theory that in mining towns, that abuse is probably higher than other towns because of the kind of sort of folks that get attracted to it. It's a place you can hide. It's easy to come in if you're a felon. And I'm not saying that a felon makes you anything, but there's a tendency for that to come in. We had Hell's Angels as if they were, your neighbor next door. We had gang members from the surrounding towns. We had a host of folks in that town. And yet, in some respects, I felt really safe in my home of trauma. So as I was this weekend and I was listening to these stories, I was overcome by the sense of what others went through. And I found this, that I had a bias that it was only me. I had a bias that it was only my family. I had a bias that probably no one had my journey. What was interesting is others had a bias that we looked like the perfect family. We weren't. We looked good on the outside. You only had to look across. And there was a couple of comments. I remember a neighbor up the street said, "I knew you guys lived in the garage. But, my dad was beating me up every day, so, I thought." Those were the conversations I had. Everyone definitely has challenges. Everyone definitely has a story. And the opportunity that we could come together here to talk about diversity is to listen and pay attention to where my bias is. Where are the things what are the things I'm not looking at? What are the things I'm not wanting to look at? That's the best one. When we say that I'm not part of the problem, I'm not, and nor do I have biases, already we've shut the door on learning. We've already shut the door. So the invitation during AIF, which, by the way, we call it adventure. When you hike Yellowstone, it isn't easy, right? Adventure means that you're going to go through some difficult things and things you don't want to look at and things someone else doesn't want to look at. So how can we do this together in community? It's a deeply sacred gift for someone to reflect back to you how you're showing up in the world and to help you become more evolved. When someone reflects back to you something you've done in these experiences, the opportunity exists for you to stop and go, let me look at that. Or, oh, no. Diversity is no different issue than if you're talking about any other spiritual principle. They're all the same. It applies to all or it doesn't. We know that as being in this philosophy. Forgiveness is a big part of that process. So I'm going to ask you a question, again, interactive part of my talk, and then I'm going to end it. Because I know I've got some folks in the room going, when is she done? What country is the number one country or the country that has the most heart attacks? Okay, you're close. Susan Calic knows. Susan, which one? Russia. How come you know that? Thank you. Love honesty. Here's how it goes. Right now, it's Russia, it's India, and it's the US. We're the top three. And what they're saying, although I'm going to give India an exception because I haven't looked deep enough there, is that part of what the study is showing is that when we don't practice forgiveness, we set ourselves up for a literal heart attack. Forgiveness is a way, spiritually, to reduce your chances of a heart attack. Who knew? Sorry, folks. Sorry about that. Desmond Tutu said this: failure to forgive can lead to heart disease. Studies have found that the act of forgiveness can reap huge rewards for your health, lowering the risk of heart attack and improving your sleep and a whole host of things. Now, here's why. On the spiritual realm, truth and reconciliation are processes that include forgiveness, by the way. And because they're processes, they're ongoing. We will have to forgive every day the rest of our lives. We will have to be forgiven every day the rest of our lives. In a place where racism continues or where the harm continues, we are still engaging in processes. Racism has changed. It's not the same in the 50s as it is today. It is more silent, it is more implicit, it is quiet often. But the one that knows it is the one it's targeted to. It begins, this forgiveness, this reconciliation, it begins with telling the story. You can't get to forgiveness without confronting the reality. And you must name the hurt. We must hear the hurt. We must be a container for that hurt. We must be willing to look at ourselves so we know where we hurt. Hurt people hurt people. Can I get an amen? Amen. Thank you. Forgiveness isn't cheap. And it isn't a cheap, okay, everyone, let's just forgive and forget. No, you can't. You actually have to remember in order to forgive. Mindfulness and presence, empathy, forgiveness. These are 4 things I want you to take with you as you go into AIF. If you haven't signed up for AIF because you don't think you're ready, okay. Get the book anyway. Do the work anyway. We get to do it wherever we're at. Grace is provided, but to do nothing. That's not the call. Let us pray. As we come together with diversity as the spiritual principle, that principle that speaks of the oneness and unity that is God, not sameness, diversity. It's the divine uniqueness of all of creation. And that divine uniqueness must be balanced in order for it to be in the image of God. Knowing that the image of God exists as all creation, I acknowledge that within each one of us. Each one of us have that divine spark, that knowing, that opportunity, that pull, that urge, that invitation to open at the top. So as I anchor this idea of diversity in this beautiful space of communities, knowing that the divine community is all of creation, I just know that as we walk through this journey as spiritual beings, humans having that spiritual experience, knowing that our humanity as well as our spirituality is one. It includes it all. So I just anchor for these next 4 weeks of study. Surrender, my favorite 4-letter word. Peace, grace for myself and others. Truth, opening to a bigger truth. Empathy, knowing that it's not just my journey, but another's. Mindfulness, to be present. And each day, to forgive myself and others, and to allow this beautiful divine practice to speak as itself. So in that vein, knowing that God is all there is, knowing that the words I've spoken correspond, and that's what the law does, is corresponds. It's action back to our beliefs. I just let this go, and I let God, and so it is. Amen.